Michael Schur with Wes Clark, and we are joined to talk about one of our favorite subjects, our least favorite people, but our favorite subjects here at the Young Turks, Senator Joseph Lieberman. We're joined by Steve Kornacki of Faster Time. Steve, thanks for taking the time to be on the Young Turks today.
Sure, happy to be here.
Well, here you present a great question, and I think it's one that even the most rank-and-file Democrats, anyone who's been paying even mild attention to the health care debate, are asking right now, because that's when he has been at his worst. What can we do as Democrats about Joe Lieberman? When can we do it? So I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, on one level, it seems sort of like the answer ought to be pretty easy, and the action against him ought to be the possibility of action against him really should be kind of immediate. But when you when you look at the sort of the political realities of the U.S. Senate and how Lieberman has sort of played his cards for the last few years, you quickly realize he's probably safe for the short term. The simplest reason is look how he played this healthcare thing. I mean, he drove progressives crazy, obviously, by nearly running the thing off the rails, and even though he was there in the end, he obviously stripped it of the public option, and then the whole the Medicare buy-in alternative that was floated, he also made sure that was killed. And so he drove everybody crazy, within the Democratic Party, at least on the progressive side of things. But in the end, he was there, to vote to break up the filibuster, along with every other Democrat and no Republicans. So he can make the claim to Harry Reid and to others in the Senate that, hey, I'm no more, disloyal than, Blanche Lincoln or Ben Nelson, and there's no movement to go after them. So probably not going to be a movement to go after him. And the other thing is on so many, sort of routine procedural things that don't get much attention but are sort of essential to the, day-to-day, functioning of the Senate, Republicans, we keep hearing, are putting up, roadblock, after roadblock this year with filibusters and things like that. Lieberman is generally there with Reid and with the Democrats, in all of those. So he's more important than you realize, to what Harry Reid has to do on a day-in, day-out basis. And so as long as it's 60-40, which is going to be the case for the rest of this Congress, he's pretty much safe. And then you look after this Congress, and maybe if the Democrats, say, lose a few seats, and suddenly you're not looking at him as a 60th of the vote, maybe then theoretically they'd go after him. But you start to look at it, it's like, Democratic leaders have made excuses for Lieberman, time and again for the last 3, 4, 5 years. Always giving him one more chance, always giving him the benefit of the doubt.
I mean, the most offensive of those excuses, again, we're talking to Steve Kornacki from Faster Times, the most, I would say egregious of those is when he was able to retain his chairmanship, when he hadn't done anything. In other words, I think it was a fear of losing that 60th senator that informed that as well. But, I mean, he had campaigned against the Democratic nominee for president, and not just campaigned, not just voted for and said, I'm supporting and endorsing. We all know he spoke at his convention. He's done everything to offend the Democratic base now for at least 18 months, and if not longer than that. Clearly, a lot of people were upset with him.
And don't forget, the one of the key voices and forces in getting him that chairmanship was Obama and the White House.
Well, that was because they were trying to be conciliatory at that time, and they found out that conciliation doesn't do anything, as has proven out. I mean, we had one Republican vote. Of the 535 members of Congress, there was one Republican vote from Joe Gow in Louisiana for his health care plan. So, I mean, this conciliation apparently doesn't work with the other side of the aisle. And that's where Lieberman finds himself so often. And, going over what you just spoke about, he has proven his power there in the Senate, because he actually did wield it. He said, I will not vote with you if there's a public option. Boom, there's no public option. Boom, I'll vote with you. And so he has this strange power in the Senate that no matter how unpopular he is, he's still able to wield. What can change that? Is there anything immediate?
I've got a question for Steve. Steve, Wes here. Now, how much of it, though, is actual Lieberman believing or not believing in anything, and how much is it he's playing to his voters in Connecticut? Because Connecticut, I don't feel like Connecticut's that liberal or left-leaning a state.
Well, and the whole idea of the insurance industry, much of the insurance industry left Hartford anyway, although a lot of it's there, a lot of it left.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I don't know how much of it is playing to the voters in Connecticut. I mean, it's true that if you look, and I'd be really curious to see the next poll that comes out in Connecticut, but as of about a month ago, his numbers in the state were actually sort of on the rise, and he was up to about a 50%, favorable rating job approval rating, and about 45%, disapproval, which actually was significantly higher for him than it had been, a year earlier. But Connecticut is, it's a blue state. If you poll healthcare there, if you poll a question like the public option there, it does very well. So I'm not sure if he was really playing to his constituents there. But then, you had that famous, tape of him that emerged, where just in September he was meeting with an editorial board in Connecticut, and he sort of volunteers that, hey, what would be a great idea on health care, if we allow people to buy into Medicare early, say around the age of 55. And of course that ends up being the compromise that's floated when he tries to, think the public option, and suddenly he's calling it socialized medicine, and he says he opposes it. Yeah. So it seems it's not really about what he believes. I'm not sure it's necessarily about what, polls show and voters in Connecticut believe. But I think this theory that it's Joe Lieberman wanting to be the center of attention, and also at the same time, stick it in the eyes of the progressives, who sort of tried to take him out in 2006.
Yeah,
trying to balance those two.
So you think it really just comes down to Joe Lieberman being a dick?
I wouldn't be the first to say that, I guess.
I guess not. Okay, let's talk, Steve, for a second about the politics in Connecticut and about what can happen. And we don't have very much time to do this, but it's a really important thing. Let's talk about when Connecticut voters actually can do something, presuming that Lieberman runs again. Some of the people that are involved there, I know Richard Blumenthal, who I'll let you take this, but he's one of the names coming up. And I sort of like Chris Murphy, also a congressman from the 5th District in Connecticut.
Well, Lieberman's seat will be up in 2012. Presume he wants to run again. Who knows? He'll be 70 then. Maybe he won't. But if he wants to, the easiest thing on paper that Democrats can do to take him out is to have Richard Blumenthal, who's the Attorney General of Connecticut, enter the race, as a Democrat. Presumably Lieberman would have to then run as an independent and, get some help from the Republicans, or maybe just run as a Republican. Really wouldn't matter if you look at Blumenthal's popularity. He's been the Attorney General there since 1990, and he just has astronomical popularity. Barring some kind of scandal between now and then, that will probably still be the case. And polls show, there's already been a poll a few months ago that showed Blumenthal beating Lieberman, by about 30 points. The problem is there could be some developments in the next few months that take Blumenthal out of contention for 2012. One is the governor's race in Connecticut. Jody Rell, the Republican, who unexpectedly announced last month she's not going to run in 2010. She had very high popularity. She's out of the race. Suddenly there's an opening there, and a lot of people wonder if Blumenthal would really rather be governor of Connecticut than senator.
Haven't people wondered that about Blumenthal for a long time, though? He's never run for higher office, and haven't people been... his name seems always to come up.
Sure. He calls himself jokingly the Eternal General.
Yeah.
But if you look at the years, he got elected in 1990, there's never really been as good a shot for a Democrat in the gubernatorial race in Connecticut as there will be in 2010. I mean, it's a joke now, but if you look at John Rowland,
even after John Rowland, even after John Rowland.
Well, he in 2002 and 1998 were re-election years for Rowland, and he was at 60-70% approval. In 2006, Jody Rell had taken over, and she had an 80% approval rating. And it was a strong Democratic year nationally, but she ended up winning that race by 31 points. Yeah. I know the Democrat wasn't that strong, but one of the reasons the Democrat wasn't that strong was she had this amazing popularity. And it was another reason why she wasn't going to attract maybe the type of competition in 2010, that's now emerged on the Democratic side, because really is a vacuum there. So maybe he'd be interested in that.
So say we don't have Blumenthal for Senate in 2012. Who are some of the other names that are being talked about?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it. The big one there is Chris Murphy, the congressman sort of from the Naugatuck Valley area. Defeated Nancy Johnson in 2006. He should be, he's about, I think, 35, 36 years old, sort of a young up-and-comer. I think clearly has some ambition. He should be, on the scene then. The one thing to watch is his district is, in a very bad year for Democrats, his district is competitive in Connecticut. There's a state senator, Sam Caligari, who's going to run against him, a Republican state senator who's going to run against him this fall. If the atmosphere is just particularly toxic for Democrats, and that would really be, unemployment still, 10% or above next fall, he could be in a little trouble. But otherwise, he should be around in 2012.
Okay. Well, Steve Kornacki, thanks for keeping us posted on something that is important to, I think, every single person who listens to this show. And we'll check back with you as Joe Mentum starts to gain.
All right. Sounds good.
Happy New Year.